My brother grabbed my passport 2 days before my trip, held it over the fire, and said, "You don't leave until this family is done using you." I watched the cover curl black without flinching. Then I set one sealed envelope on the table, and by sunrise, Dad had gone white. Hey everyone, before we get into today's video, we put a lot of work into every single video on this channel, and subscribing is the simplest way to make sure you never miss one. Plus, it helps us reach more people who love this kind of content. So if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that button. Thank you so much now. Let's dive in. The smell of burning leather is something you do not forget. It is sweet and chemical at the same time, like something expensive dying slowly. My brother held my passport over the gas burner on our father's kitchen stove and let the flame lick the corner until the cover curled black and peeled away from the binding. He watched my face the entire time, waiting for me to beg, waiting for me to lunge. I gave him neither. I just stood there with my hands in my pockets and watched a $200 document turn to ash, because the envelope in my bag upstairs was worth more than anything that passport could have carried me toward. My name is Matt. I am 24 years old. And that night, in the kitchen where I grew up, I watched my brother Kevin destroy something he thought was my only way out. He was wrong. The passport he burned had been expired for 4 months. My real one, the one with a valid visa stamped inside, was sitting in a safety deposit box at a bank 12 minutes from our house. I had put it there 6 weeks ago, along with my birth certificate, my college degree, and copies of every financial document that connected me to my family's business. I let Kevin burn it. I let him believe he had won. And I waited. But this story does not start in the kitchen. It starts 6 months earlier, in my father's office, in a drawer he never thought I would open. My father's name is Robert. He owns 6 rental properties across 2 counties. Strip malls, apartment complexes, a small office building on Grant Avenue. On paper, the portfolio is worth just over $3 million. In practice, it is worth whatever the person managing it can squeeze out of aging pipes, difficult tenants, and insurance companies that treat every claim like a personal insult. That person was me. I started when I was 17. My father called me into the kitchen one evening after dinner. Kevin was out with friends. My mother was watching television in the other room. My father sat me down at the table, put his hand on my shoulder, and said the sentence that would shape the next 7 years of my life. "Help me with the buildings, Matt. Learn the business, and all of this will be yours someday." He shook my hand. I shook back. I was 17 years old, and my father was offering me a future. I did not ask for a contract. I did not ask for terms. I did not ask what someday meant or what all of this included. I just shook his hand and went to work. By 19, I was handling tenant complaints, coordinating repairs, and filing the quarterly taxes. I learned how to negotiate with plumbers at midnight and insurance adjusters at 9 in the morning. I learned which tenants paid on time and which ones needed a phone call on the 3rd of every month. I learned what a boiler sounds like 3 days before it dies, and I learned that the city inspection office closes at 4:30, not 5, no matter what the website says. By 21, I was negotiating leases, managing insurance renewals, and taking emergency calls at 2 in the morning. A burst pipe on Christmas Eve in Building 4. A lockout on Thanksgiving in Building 2. A kitchen fire in Building 6 that required 4 hours on the phone with the insurance company and 3 follow-up visits to the unit. I handled all of it. Every call, every visit, every negotiation. My father's number was on the leases. But when something broke, the call got forwarded to me. Every single time. By 23, I was running all 6 properties by myself. Not helping, not assisting, running. The tenants knew my name. The vendors had my number saved. The insurance company asked for me by first name when I called. I was the person who made the buildings work, and nobody in my family treated that as anything more than Matt being Matt. Reliable, available, permanent, like a light switch. You do not thank a light switch for turning on. Kevin's title was Operations Manager. His responsibilities on paper included client relations, vendor coordination, and property showings. In practice, Kevin showed up for lease signings, added his name to the commission line, and drove a car paid for by income I generated from buildings I managed. He was not a partner. He was a signature on paperwork that someone else filled out. He once asked me what Building 3's zip code was. He had been managing it for 2 years. My father paid me a flat monthly amount. It had not changed in 4 years. Not once. Not even after I took over Building 6, which had been hemorrhaging money under Kevin's supervision until I restructured the lease terms and filled 3 empty units in 2 months. No raise, no bonus, no conversation about what the additional work was worth. Just the same number deposited into my account on the first of every month, like a subscription my father had set and forgotten about. I did not know what market rate was until an old college friend asked me what I earned and then went quiet for a long time before saying, "Matt, that is less than what my company pays interns." I did the math that night. Over 7 years, the gap between what I was paid and what a market rate property manager would have earned came to just over $200,000. One page, 2 columns, 7 years of numbers that told a story my father never wanted anyone to read. I saved that page. I would need it later. 6 months before the kitchen, I was looking for a tax filing in my father's office. Second drawer on the left. The one he never locks because I am the only person who uses his office for actual work. I found the tax document. I also found something underneath it. The operating agreement for the family LLC. I had never seen it before. I did not know it existed in a physical form. I assumed the way you assume things when you trust someone. Seemed that the business was structured the way my father described it. A family operation, all of us together, building something for the future. I opened the agreement. I read the section titled Members and Ownership Interests. 2 names, Robert Brennan, 70%, Kevin Brennan, 30%. I read it again. I turned the page. I looked for an addendum, an amendment, a handwritten note in the margin, something that said my name, something that acknowledged 7 years of 2 a.m. phone calls and tenant negotiations and tax filings and insurance disputes and emergency repairs handled in my boxers at midnight in January while Kevin slept in a king-sized bed he bought with commissions from leases I negotiated. There was nothing. I was not on the paperwork. I had never been on the paperwork. The handshake at the kitchen table when I was 17 was the beginning and the end of my legal relationship with my father's business. I had no shares, no title, no protections, and no claim to a single brick in any of the 6 buildings I had been running since I was old enough to drive. If my father sold every property tomorrow, Kevin would get 30%. I would get a handshake and a memory. I put the agreement back in the drawer. I closed it. I walked out of the office, through the hallway where family photos hung on the wall, past the kitchen where the handshake happened, and out the front door. I sat in my car for 45 minutes with the engine off and my hands on the steering wheel. The dashboard clock changed from 3:12 to 3:57 while I sat there. The street was quiet. A neighbor's porch light flickered on and off like it could not decide whether to stay awake. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I just sat there doing the math. Not the financial math. The other kind. The kind where you add up every early morning, every missed weekend, every phone call you answered on a holiday, every promise that was made in a kitchen over a handshake, and you realize the total comes to 0. Because 0 is what your name is worth on a document that was written without you in the room. I drove back to the house at 4 a.m. I went to bed. I set my alarm for 6. I had an inspection at Building 3 at 8 and a lease review for Building 5 at noon. That was the day the plan started. But nobody knew it, because the plan looked exactly like my normal life. I still answered the calls. I still managed the buildings. I still showed up. The only difference was that now I was showing up with a clock in my head. And every day that passed, the clock got closer to 0. I did not rush. I am not the kind of person who makes decisions on fire. I am the kind who makes them on concrete. Slowly, 1 block at a time. Over the next 6 months, I did 5 things. First, I opened a safety deposit box at a bank on Whitfield Road, 12 minutes from the house. I moved my real passport, my birth certificate, my degree, and copies of every financial document tying me to the family business. In a house where people take your things to keep you from leaving, the first act of freedom is putting your identity somewhere their hands cannot reach. Second, I applied for a job at a property development firm in Edinburgh, Scotland. A former professor had connected me with their hiring manager. I interviewed over video calls during my lunch breaks at a coffee shop 3 blocks from Building 4. They offered me the position 6 weeks before the kitchen night. Twice my current salary. Relocation support. Housing for the first 6 months. A start date 19 days away. Third, I told my family about the Edinburgh offer. I told them 3 weeks before the kitchen. I said it at Sunday dinner, between the roast and the pie. Because I wanted witnesses, and because I was tired of treating my own life like a secret. The table went quiet, the way tables go quiet when someone says something that changes the temperature of the room. My mother set her fork down. Kevin leaned back in his chair. My father chewed slowly, swallowed. I heard Sorko and wiped his mouth with his napkin before speaking. Edinburgh, he said, like he was tasting the word and finding it bitter. The reaction over the next 3 weeks was immediate and exactly what I expected. My father called 4 times that week. Each call followed the same script. After everything this family has given you, You have a responsibility here, Matt. Edinburgh is not real life. This is real life. These buildings, this family. He talked about the properties the way a man talks about children, like they needed me, like leaving them was abandonment, like 6 buildings made of concrete and pipe had feelings that my departure would hurt. The second call was longer. He brought up the handshake. I gave you my word, son. I said all of this would be yours. Does that mean nothing? It meant everything when I was 17. It meant nothing now that I had seen the operating agreement, but I did not tell him that. Not yet. The envelope was not ready. Kevin's approach was different. He did not call. He cornered me in the kitchen after dinner one night and said he was willing to manage the transition if I stayed another year. He used the word transition like it was a business term he had learned from a podcast. What he meant was, stay long enough for me to figure out how to pretend I can do your job. What he did not say was, if you leave, the income stops, and if the income stops, the credit cards I have been running up against property revenue I do not generate will come due. My mother called 3 times. Each call was softer than the last. Your father is not a young man. Ow, Matthew. What happens if something goes wrong and you are on the other side of the world? Kevin needs your help right now. He is not ready. She was not lying exactly. She was doing something worse. She was grieving a future that had not happened yet and using that grief as a leash. She had done it when I looked at a job in Denver. She had done it when a friend in Austin offered me a position. She did it every time I got close to the door. Same tears, same script, different city. Fourth, I discovered the sabotage. 3 weeks after I told my family about Edinburgh, the firm sent me an unusual email. They asked whether I had family obligations that might affect my start date. I called my contact at the firm. She told me carefully that someone named Robert Brennan had called their office directly. He told them I was essential to a family operation and might not be fully committed. He tried to kill the offer from inside the house. I asked my contact to forward me the email chain. She did. I printed it. I put it in a manila envelope that was starting to get thick. Fifth, I built the envelope. Manila, standard size, sealed with clear tape across the flap. Inside were 4 documents. The operating agreement with my name circled in the place it should have been and was not. The email chain from Edinburgh proving my father's sabotage. The salary comparison showing the $200,000 gap. And a handwritten note on a single index card that I wrote at 3 a.m. one night when the math finally finished adding up. The note said, the handshake was a lie. The paperwork proves it. I am done working for a family that writes my name in pencil and everyone else's in ink. I sealed the envelope. I put it in my bag. And I waited for the move I knew was coming. It came on a Wednesday night, 2 days before my flight. I was in my room packing a suitcase, folding shirts, rolling jeans, putting my charger in the side pocket. The small, ordinary actions of a man about to leave a country. I heard Kevin's footsteps on the stairs before I saw him. Heavy, deliberate, the walk of a man who had been given a job and was ready to do it. My father's enforcer. The muscle. Not physically, emotionally. Kevin does not think for himself. He does not need to. He just needs to be loud enough and close enough to make you feel trapped. That is his only skill, and it is the only one my father has ever needed from him. He did not knock. He opened my door, walked to the dresser, pulled open the top drawer where I kept my documents, and took the passport sitting on top, the expired one, the one I had left there like a key in a lock that opens nothing. He did not check the expiration date. He did not flip it open. He held it by the cover like a man holding a leash he just pulled off a hook. Come downstairs. I followed him to the kitchen. My father was already there, sitting at the table in the chair closest to the window. Glass of bourbon in front of him, untouched. The overhead light was on, that flat yellow glow that makes every kitchen look like an interrogation room after midnight. The window behind him was black. The neighborhood was asleep. The house was awake the way houses are only awake when something is about to break. Kevin walked to the stove. Still, he turned the burner on. The blue flame popped to life with a click and a hiss. The gas smell hit the air first, then the heat. He held the passport over the flame. The corner caught first. The blue cover darkened, then curled, then peeled away from the cardboard underneath. The lamination bubbled and blistered like skin pulling away from a burn. A thin line of smoke rose toward the ceiling and curled under the light fixture. Small black flakes floated down toward the burner grate. Kevin looked at me the entire time. His eyes were steady. His jaw was set. This was not anger. This was performance. A show designed for an audience of 2. He wanted me to panic. He wanted me to grab for it. He wanted the reaction that would let him call me emotional, unstable, not ready to leave, not capable of making decisions on my own. "You don't leave until this family is done using you," he said. There it was. Not until this family doesn't need you. Not until we figure things out together. Until this family is done using you. He said the quiet part out loud. He put the word using on the table the way you put a card face up when you think you have already won. I watched the passport burn. I smelled the leather and the plastic and the glue. I did not flinch. I did not move. I stood in the doorway with my hands in my pockets and my heartbeat as flat as the floor beneath me. Because the passport he was burning had been expired for 4 months, and the real one, the one with the visa inside, was 12 minutes away in a safety deposit box with my name on it. Not his, not my father's, mine. The passport folded in on itself and dropped into the burner grate in pieces. Kevin turned the stove off. He wiped his hands on his jeans like he had just taken out the trash. He leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, chin raised. The posture of a man who believed the conversation was over. My father had not moved. He had watched the whole thing from 6 feet away, clear line of sight. He said nothing. Not, "Stop." Not, "That is enough." Not, "Give it back." He sat there with his bourbon and let it happen because me leaving was more dangerous to him than Kevin's cruelty. A son who leaves is a son who stops working. And in this family, that was the only sin that counted. I reached for my bag. The envelope landed on the kitchen table with a soft, flat sound. Not dramatic, not heavy. Just the sound of paper meeting wood in a quiet room. My father looked at it. Kevin looked at it. Neither reached for it. I opened it myself. The first document I pulled out was the operating agreement. I set it on the table in front of my father. Open to the page that lists the members and ownership interests. 2 names, his and Kevin's. My father looked down at it. His eyes moved across the page the way they move across a lease he is about to sign. Quickly at first, then slower, then very still. "Where did you get this?" he said. "Your office. Second drawer. The one you never lock because you never thought I would look." He did not respond to that. He just stared at the page, at the 2 names, at the blank space where a third name should have been. Kevin pushed off the counter. He took a step toward the table. The crossed arms dropped. Something in his posture was starting to recalculate. "What is that?" "That is the operating agreement for Dad's LLC. Your name is on it. His name is on it. Mine is not." I looked at Kevin. "I have been running 6 buildings for 7 years. On paper, I do not exist." Kevin looked at our father. Our father did not look back. He was still staring at the page, at the 2 names, at the space where a third name was supposed to be. Kevin turned back to me. His jaw was working again, trying to find the angle, trying to find the threat that would work the way the passport was supposed to work. "It doesn't matter. You are not going anywhere. I burned your passport." I looked at him. I let a beat pass. 2 beats. Long enough for the kitchen to go completely silent except for the buzz of the overhead light and the tick of the stove cooling down. "That passport expired 4 months ago, Kevin." His face changed. Not all at once. In stages. First confusion. Then the slow, horrible math. "My real passport," I said. "The one with the valid visa stamped inside is in a safety deposit box at a bank on Whitfield Road, along with my birth certificate, my degree, and copies of every financial document that connects me to this business. I moved it all there 6 weeks ago." Kevin's posture went from leaning to braced. The satisfaction that had been sitting on his face since he dropped the burnt passport into the grate was gone, replaced by something that looked like a man standing on a floor that just cracked under his weight. "You burned a document that was already worthless," I said, "and you celebrated like you won." Kevin looked at the stove. At the grate where the passport remains still sat, curled and black. Then he looked at our father. But our father had no instructions to give. If Bright the Enforcer was looking for orders, the delegator had nothing left to delegate. The second document was the email chain from Edinburgh. I placed it beside the operating agreement. 3 weeks after I told you about the job offer, Dad, you called the firm directly. You told them I had family obligations. You told them I might not be fully committed. You tried to kill the offer before I could accept it." My father's hand moved toward the bourbon glass. He did not pick it up. His fingers rested on the base like he was checking whether it was still real. The third document was the salary comparison. 1 page, 2 columns, 7 years. "This is what you paid me, and this is what the work was worth. The gap is $212,000. You did not underpay me because the business could not afford it. Ah, you underpaid me because a cheap son is a son who cannot afford to leave. The kitchen was very quiet. The overhead light buzzed. The stove was still warm from the passport. The 3 documents sat on the table between us like evidence at a hearing nobody called for, but everyone expected. My father spoke. His voice was lower than before. Careful. I gave you my word, Matt. I shook your hand in this kitchen and told you all of this would be yours someday. I meant that. I pointed at the operating agreement without touching it. That is what your word looks like on paper. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Kevin moved, not toward me, toward our father, looking for direction, for a counterattack, for the authority he had been enforcing on his father's behalf for the last 5 years. The muscle looking for the brain, or the enforcer looking for orders. Our father gave him nothing, because for the first time in 30 years, Robert Brennan was looking at a hand he could not play. The documents were on the table. The numbers were on the page. The email chain had his name on it, and the son who dealt these cards was already standing. Kevin tried anyway. So what? You were just going to leave? Walk out? After everything? After everything. I repeated it, not as a question, as a summary. After everything I did for this family that this family never put on paper, yes. The room went quiet again. My father's face had changed color, not suddenly, slowly. The way a wall changes color when you strip off the paint and find something older and less maintained underneath. He looked at the documents the way a man looks at a bill he forgot was coming. Except he did not forget. He just never thought it would arrive. At 1 a.m, the kitchen phone rang. My mother, calling from my aunt's house where she had been staying for the weekend. Kevin must have texted her. She was already crying before I picked up. Matthew, please, your father is not a young man. If you walk out that door and something happens to him, that is on your hands. You understand that? That weight is yours to carry. I held the phone and listened to the breathing, the sniffling, the practiced grief of a woman who had used this exact script every time I got close to the door. When I applied to a job in Denver 2 years ago. When I mentioned a friend's company in Austin. When I said the word Edinburgh at the dinner table 3 weeks ago. Same tears, same timing. Same guilt arranged like flowers at a funeral that had not happened yet. Mom, I have carried this family's weight for 7 years. I am putting it down. If it falls, that is not because I let go. It is because nobody else ever picked it up. She went quiet. I heard her breathing change from the rehearsed cry to something closer to real silence. The silence of a woman who just heard a door close that she cannot open with tears. I hung up. I set the phone on the counter. My father was still at the table. The documents were still in front of him. The bourbon was still full. He had not touched it the entire night. He was not drinking. He was just sitting next to a glass, the way you sit next to someone at a hospital. Present but useless. He looked up at me, and for the first time that night he did not look angry, or strategic, or in control. He looked like a man watching a building he owns start to tilt and realizing the foundation was never as deep as he thought. We can fix this, he said. His voice was hoarse. I will add your name. We will restructure. I will fix the paperwork. All of it. He extended his hand across the table. The same hand, the same kitchen, the same gesture. 7 years later, the offer was back, wrapped in the same packaging, sitting on the same table, delivered by the same man who had already proven what his handshake was worth. I looked at his hand. I looked at him. You had 7 years to put my name on that paper. You did not need me to leave to know I deserved it. You needed me to leave because you cannot run what I built. His hand stayed in the air. I did not take it. I picked up my bag. I walked out of the kitchen. Behind me, I heard Kevin say something to our father. I did not catch the words. It did not matter. The conversation in that kitchen was no longer mine. I had already left it. I went upstairs. I finished packing. 2 suitcases, 1 carry-on. I left the closet empty, the desk clean, and the dresser drawer open. The same drawer Kevin had reached into 2 hours ago to grab a passport that was already worthless. I stood in the doorway of my room for a moment and looked at it the way you look at a room you have slept in for 24 years and are about to sleep in for the last time. The walls were the same color they had been when I was 12. The window still stuck if you opened it past the halfway mark. The ceiling fan still made a clicking sound on the second speed. Everything was the same. I was the only thing that had changed. At 5:45 in the morning, a cab pulled up outside. I carried my bags downstairs one at a time. The kitchen light was still on. My father was still at the table. He had not moved. The operating agreement was still open in front of him. The bourbon glass was still full. He did not look up when I passed through. I do not know if he chose not to look at me or if he had simply run out of ways to see me that did not involve seeing what he had done. I set my house key on the counter, right beside the stove, right beside the spot where the burned passport had fallen through the grate hours earlier. The key made a small sound when it touched the granite. Quiet, final, like a period at the end of a sentence that did not need to be read aloud. I walked out the front door. The morning air was cool and smelled like cut grass from a neighbor's yard. The cab driver put my bags in the trunk without conversation. I got in the back seat. I did not look back at the house. I did not need to. I had spent 6 months memorizing every part of it I was going to leave behind, and I had spent 7 years earning the right to walk away from it. Within 72 hours, the emergency phone started ringing. Building 2 had a water heater issue. The tenant called at 7 in the morning, panicked, saying there was no hot water in the entire unit and the landlord's emergency line was going to voicemail. Building 4 had a lease renewal that nobody had prepared. The tenant had been told by Matt 3 weeks ago that the new terms would be ready by Friday. Friday came. Nobody sent anything. Building 6 had a city inspection scheduled that nobody remembered. The inspector showed up. Nobody was there to let him in. He left a violation notice on the door. Kevin answered the first call. He tried to handle it. He called a plumber who told him the heater needed to be replaced, not repaired. Kevin did not know the vendor account number. He did not know which insurance policy covered the unit. He did not know the tenant's lease terms or whether the replacement was the landlord's responsibility or the tenant's. He answered the second call, Building 4. A tenant wanted to know about the renewal terms Matt had promised to finalize. Kevin said he would look into it. He did not look into it. He did not know where the lease templates were saved. He did not know the rent adjustment formula Matt used. He did not know any of the things that Matt had been doing quietly and completely for 7 years while Kevin collected a title and a paycheck. By the 5th call, Kevin had stopped picking up entirely. His phone sat on the kitchen counter, buzzing and buzzing, the screen lighting up with numbers he did not recognize from tenants he had never spoken to, in buildings he could not manage, in a business that was learning, in real time, exactly how much one person was worth when that person was the only one who actually worked. The kitchen at Sunrise looked like a room where something had ended, but nothing had started yet. The overhead light was still buzzing. The operating agreement was still open on the table, the 2 names visible from across the room. The bourbon glass sat untouched. Azure the amber liquid catching the first light from the east-facing window. The email chain from Edinburgh sat beside it, my father's words typed in a font he did not choose, printed on a page he never expected to see. And on the counter, beside the stove where my passport had burned 7 hours earlier, my house key sat alone, small, brass, the key that opened every door in a house that never put my name on a single piece of paper. My father was still at the table. He had not slept. He had not moved. His hands were flat on the surface, one on each side of the documents, like a man trying to hold together something that had already split down the middle. The chair across from him was empty. The morning light came through the window slow and pale and quiet. It moved across the table and touched the key on the counter. The key looked very small in that light, small and final and already starting to belong to a different story. The house was silent. The phone was not ringing yet. It would start soon.